Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Write Hive Conference. As always, this con is loaded to the brim with great sessions for writers, writing professionals, and every member of the publishing industry in general. Before we jump into the panel, I want to take a moment, of course, to thank our host, Write Hive, for coordinating this awesome event year after year. For those of you who don't know, Write Hive is a nonprofit organization run entirely by volunteers who provide the writing community with free and inclusive resources, events, programming, connections, and all things indie related. They operate year round and thrive with support from attendees like you. So thank you so much. And thank you to Write Hive for remaining dedicated to writing the future that we need. Now, our 2025 conference brings you to this session, Cooperative Publishing, the ins and outs of indie co-ops, featuring our spectacular panelists, Jamie Krakover, Joyce Chng, and Kristin Jacques. All right, Joyce, you're at the top of my screen, so I'm going to have you go first and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Joyce. I write science fiction and fantasy, and I write YA and also middle grade, as well as picture books plus games. I'm Singaporean, based in Singapore. Hello.
Oh, thanks so much, Joyce. Good to see you again. Kristin?
Hello, I'm Kristin Jacques. I write LGBTQ fantasy, romance, and science fiction. And I'm really happy to be here for the third year in a row.
Awesome. Welcome back again. And Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Krakover. I am an aerospace engineer by day and a writer by night, and I write young adult and middle grade science fiction and fantasy. So excited to be here.
Yeah, nice to see another middle grade author. I'm a middle grade fantasy author as well, so fabulous. Now, I am not going to lie, before this panel, I have never heard of co-ops. When I think of co-ops, I think of businesses and like nonprofit organizations partnering up with other organizations or for-profit organizations to come up with some type of project. So I was definitely intrigued with this panel, and I'm so excited to be here. And so that leads me directly to our first question. What the heck is an indie co-op? So Jamie, I'm going to start with you on this one. Tell me, what's an indie co-op in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can vary person to person. I think just a lot of terms in independent publishing kind of vary, but for me, I'm part of an indie co-op called Snowy Wings Publishing, and for me, it's really about the community being able to support one another. Kind of working together, being able to share experiences. I don't think I would have survived self-publishing without having this community. And my co-op has been really, really supportive. I came in like knowing nothing about how to do any of the stuff, like how to get stuff on Ingram or any of that. So it for me it's really been a support system, and then being now that I've been around the block a couple of times, being able to support other new authors and being able to promote each other, cheer each other on when folks are selling well or winning awards or those kinds of things too. So,
Joyce?
Actually, I'm also part of Snowy Wings Publishing as well, and I came into it like, I have heard Snowy Wings Publishing for a while, so it's like, but to me, indie co-op is where people get together, indie club writers get together and cooperate and help one another. It's more like a collaboration, and we just support one another, and that's the best thing in indie publishing, because indie publishing is quite scary as well. So we need that support network to help one another, uplift one another, promote one another. Yes.
Kristin, is your experience the same in terms of your
Yeah, for me,
understanding of your
my understanding of, or my experience with indie co-ops is like that community aspect and like having everyone kind of pool their resources together and being able to kind of uh, avoid the pitfalls of indie publishing, because you have everyone has bringing their own experiences to the table. They'll bring their own warnings to the table and like what they've been through. And, you kind of learn so much from each other. And, as Jamie was saying, like now I can help people coming in to the co-op and like helping them get started. So it's just that sharing and caring of resources.
awesome. Great. So then in terms of each of you, how did you guys end up starting or joining your particular co-ops? Kristin, do you want to say that?
So mine kind of started from a failure. I was with a small press that suddenly folded with very little warning, and I didn't know how to go about republishing the story that I had with them. And then a friend reached out and said, "Hey, we have an indie co-op that we have, you know, we could help you get your feet back under you and help you get your story back out there, hook you up with ISBNs, that kind of thing, and tell you how to get back going." So it was definitely a great opportunity, and I'm really glad that I took the chance because it allowed me to maintain control of this work, but also have all the resources that came. I had more resources than I did with the small press.
Oh, awesome. Right. Jamie, is your experience the same? Or how did you start or join your co-op?
Yeah, so mine actually started out of a quasi failure as well. I was originally agented and I had been working through edits with my agent, and she was like, one more round of edits and we'll go out on sub. And then, like, 2 weeks after she said that, she left the industry and the rug just got completely pulled out from underneath me. And I was just completely lost. And I was excited because at the time I was pregnant with my son. So I was like, great, I'll be on sub while I'm, dealing with maternity leave and all that. And it just like didn't work. And so I spent a lot of time feeling sorry for myself. And then everybody was like, oh, you'll have no problem getting another agent. Newsflash, I had, like, it was impossible. Um, I would have thought like a book that hadn't been on sub but that had been previously agented would be like, great, no problem. And so after a while, I was like, I need to do something that's for me, and like I know that this book is good enough, and that it should be out in the world, and I want it to be out in the world. And so, one of my critique partners, and part of my local writing group recommended Snowy Wings to me. She's another member, and said, hey, you should check this out. You should self-publish. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. I'm terrified, but I took a flying leap, and yeah, it was the best decision I ever made. So.
And Joyce, you're in the same indie co-op. And so how did you start, or how did you end up joining this particular co-op?
So basically, I'll all that way. So Fireheart is a YA fantasy that was like already like published in Southeast Asia or Asia, and it's actually it's under Scholastics Asia. So but the only problem is it's only Asia only, and it's not extremely but very censored. So in order to be published in, say, Southeast Asia or Asia, you need to take out certain elements like LGBT elements, because we have a growing religious right here, and they are quite particular about anything about homosexuality or queer or lesbianism. They want to take it out. So I literally have distributors pulling me aside and say, in order to, when the moment the local censor board authorities detect any hints of like LGBT or queer elements in your book, they'll be off the shelves. You'll be on the banned list, and you won't be able to have your thing like books on the shelves. So a lot of I think LGBT authors here also in Southeast Asia end up self-censoring because we do not want to have our books taken off just like that. So I feel that Fireheart should have a bigger audience with a truer like feel to it, like a more authentic feel. So I reached out to Lisa, and I was able to get it out into the more international crowd with I'm more honest to myself that Fireheart was supposed to be sapphic and LGBT. So yes, that's how I joined a indie co-op.
Awesome. Great. So then from your experiences, it seems like each of us have had, and each of you have had different types of experiences that you would consider as a failure, and that's what brought you to the indie co-ops. And so it sounds like the collaboration is definitely a big plus. Beyond that, or in addition to that, what do you find to be the pros and cons of this particular type of publishing? Joyce, what do you think are the pros and cons of indie co-ops?
I think one of the pros, the biggest one, is community and support, and you get people helping one another because the editor you not using, but you are working with is also a member of the co-op as well. So you just want to help one another and uplift. Most of important is uplift and support. I think the cons is, I think, to me, just to me only, is how is still how indie publishing is perceived. Because trad publishing is like, indie publishers like indie self-help. So it's that stigma still there. But I think being a co-op is so much better than being surviving alone in the treacherous seas of publishing. I mean, you have people around you rather than you're only at the top and there's nobody else. And it's like, I think the most important thing is community.
Community. Wait. Kristin, what do you think? Pros and cons of this type of publishing?
So for me, the pros are definitely the community, as Joyce was saying, like not having to go it alone, having that support network in place. The big pros that I found for me was having kind of like marketing help, especially because that's where I super flounder, and event organization help. Like I'm kind of part of, I would almost call them two groups slash co-ops. And through them, I've been able to get author events that I've never been able to do before. And I have people to go to with cons and things like that. So like that support network is huge. However, on the con side, like the downside of that is that the co-ops I've joined, I'm still responsible for all the indie publishing costs. So having access to those resources is great, but it's still on me to get the editing done and the cover art done and like all the publishing fees that come along with that. And that's something that was previously covered by the small presses that I've worked with, but now it's on me. So for me, that was a big con personally. But every co-op is different. Some co-ops do share the editing work, or they'll have critique partners that kind of like work with that, but some don't. And there's pros and cons to that too. Like if you're sharing in the editing costs, they might also take a percentage of your royalties. Whereas if the cost is on you, you keep all your royalties. So you kind of weigh what works best for you.
Jamie, do you agree something similar?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the con side of things. Like if you're still you're still responsible for all the costs that goes along with that. But you do, on the flip side, our co-op keeps lists of editors and cover artists and things that we can use, and our particular co-op has like certain standards that they try to uphold, and so that that kind of helps a little bit with the stigma. But I don't think people really realize that a lot of people that do the independent publishing don't just like put stuff on the page and then throw it out on Amazon and say, yeah, it's good to go. So I think that's really a pro there, is having that set of standards and that guidance. And then I think the other big pro, our co-op has access to some of the review sites and things, so we're able to submit and get reviews. So that's super helpful to like kind of help and get some of the advertising out there as well. So
Awesome. So like reviews, you refer to like trade reviews. As a co-op, you can reach out to the trade
correct.
pubs
Yeah, yeah.
for that.
Yep.
Got it. That's good. Okay, cool. So the next question that I have for the group is, what do you think is the purpose of an indie co-op versus one not dealing, how does it differ maybe from a small press, and then maybe even just going at it alone? Like, what do you feel like is the main purpose of having that indie co-op name to kind of help you get your stories out into the world, right? So Kristin, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, the name kind of works the same way as like having a small press publish you. Like it kind of gives you that umbrella, as it were, so that uh, it looks almost more credible, as it were. I hate saying it like that, but it kind of it lends a certain credibility to your title that, it makes it more appealing, and it kind of like helps slacken a little that stigma that just like clings to indie publishing still. So there's a lot of reasons. Like even people who go it alone, sometimes they'll have like an LLC that's completely different from their name, or to look like they have, or they will create their own house basically to publish under.
Joyce, what do you think? What do you feel like is the main purpose of having indie co-ops?
I think it's also, as Kristin says, it's the credibility as well, that you have a kind of an established or credible sounding name that you can go before. It's just like a house. It's like a publishing house. It's just a publishing house with a community behind it that is like helping one another. So I think that's the thing. That's the difference. But credibility is
Like a uniform house. Jamie, what do you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think you kind of get the best of both worlds. Like you get to be an independent author, you get to be the boss of, yourself within the guidance that, is outlined for you. But then you also have this community and you have access to things that, as just a solo independent publisher, you wouldn't necessarily have access to. And having that instant support system and those kinds of things, and people that can cheer you on and help market you and all of that kind of stuff, I think is really helpful. So, you kind of get like a lot of the benefits that you would, many of the benefits that you might get as a trade publisher, but you still get to be your own boss. And although that does come with a price. So
Right. That's definitely one of the things that I would be curious in, as someone who went with a small press, and not having, for the very reason of not wanting to. It's not that I don't want to incur the cost. I couldn't afford the cost of publishing, especially as a debut author. And so I wouldn't even know or begin to know where that it is at. So you guys are saying with the co-op, does the co-op have assistance in finding that funding beyond just like discounts or collaborative groups, options? Kristen's like raising your hand, like here. So like in that
I
funding
know
question.
that with our co-op, like similarly, we do have editors and cover artists on retainer who work with authors, like with their budgets, who work with payment plans, who try to like make it so that the author can afford it, even if it's in installments. So it's definitely important to have that flexibility in your co-op situation.
Got it. Joyce, is it? Do you think, how is like the funding issue? Well, both Joyce and Jim, you guys are in the same co-op. So do you guys have assistance? Is there like a grant program or a scholar, like some type of funding program that might help with that from your?
I think with the editors we work with, we have like payments, and then we make it so much so that it's in a way affordable for us, because we have to work with cover artists as well, and some of the cover illustrators like will also work on a installment basis as well. So it helps defray the cost, but ultimately the cost still falls back on you. But it's more affordable, and we do get this kind of like a coupons and discount for like say Ingram. So it has its benefits in it. So yeah.
Jamie.
yeah, I agree with that. And then we have some like in-house people that can do like formatting for pretty cheap if you don't know how to do those kinds of things and that kind of stuff. So that definitely helps offset some of the costs a little bit, because yeah, it can get pricey. And I think some of it is like too, talking to the people in the community and saying, is this something I really need, or should I like maybe like if I'm trying to budget for myself, where should I cut the costs? And having that mentorship and people able to guide you, like, hey, should I go spend a lot of money on swag, or is that like something I should, maybe spend more money on my editing, or whatever the case is. So
And then this, whether you can or can't, you can just let me know if you can or can't answer this question. So this one's kind of going off the topic, but do you guys split your royalties with the co-op? Like, is it we're making an investment back into the co-op? Because I'm assuming if the ISBNs are listed under the co-op name, like from a business standpoint, it's like, okay, well, my book is here under here. All the royalties are going to go in through here. And then how does that, is it like your own self-investment back into the co-ops? Is that how that works? I don't know. Anyone want
So
to take that?
for Yeah, so for ours, we get to keep all of our royalties unless it goes towards like, unless we contributed to like a group anthology or something, that, that we don't, that usually money goes back into to the co-op or group. But, um, yeah, we get to keep everything. So that
Oh.
part is nice. Yeah.
Hmm. Is that the same for, well, Joyce, you guys are in the same for, Kristin, is that the same for you as well?
Yeah,
It
same
doesn't.
as well. But we also give back,
So for us, we do. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Joyce.
we actually
No.
give back to in a way that, like, for example, one of our members lost lost their mother, and then we also give back in a way we donated money back and to help her get back to her feet. So in a way that's help that there's this ongoing like to and fro. I mean,
Support
like the
going both
support
ways
and the community
to other
is,
people.
and again, I'm coming back to community and support. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get asked like, hey, do you want to help pitch in to support the website or something? And it's always voluntary, but then, if 15 people chime in, it's like, $5 to $10 a person. So it's really reasonable if people are willing to support.
Yeah, that's
Kristin?
kind of how like we offset the costs of like running the thing. Like if we need somebody to pitch in to pay for like the website maintenance or upkeep or licensing, you put it to the group, everybody puts in a little bit. It's surprising how much spread out. It keeps the costs low for everybody. But we do keep all of our own royalties. Um, and we kind of put into the co-op because we also use the people that we've retained, like the editors who work with our co-op, we pay into them, and the cover artists, we pay into them, and so like it does pay for itself.
Mhm. Yeah, because that seems like I'm trying to think of like business partnerships. So when you have that, you're making an investment. So if I'm the first one in, am I paying back in? If you treat it like an advance where I get a cash advance on my sales, now my sales come in and they're going back in, but it sounds like no, we're all pitching as it goes. And then do you guys kind of have like your own schedule, your pacing, whatever that publication schedule is, or does is there some synergy between all of the other authors within the co-op to kind of create an ongoing schedule? Kristin, you had that. She was like raising her hand on that one.
So I know for our co-op, we have a master schedule, and we'll have people sign up for their publishing dates, and that kind of like allows people to have their own spotlight day instead of trying to all publish at once, or like usually we'll publish on a Wednesday or we'll have a surprise release on a Tuesday if the schedule's really crowded. But like having that sign up dates kind of allows you to not only like plan your publishing schedule around it, but also gives each author their chance to kind of like have the support of everybody else at the same time.
Jamie, is that the same? Do you guys have a
Yeah, we have a schedule. We have a schedule for release. We have a schedule for cover reveals.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody kind of gets their moment in the sun. And yeah, we do releases on Tuesday, cover reveals on Wednesday. Um, yeah, so that helps keep everything awesome. And yeah,
So we
and
work
then if
around
you
on them.
yeah, and then if for some reason you slip because things happen and you can't get stuff done on time, you can
Yeah.
move your date if you need to around everybody else. So
It's pretty flexible in a way that we can actually adjust the dates because life does intervene, and then we have to work around it as well. So
awesome? Cool. So the next question I have for the group is, can you guys give me examples of what you think makes an effective indie co-op versus maybe an ineffective one, or just a bad co-op to be a part of? Joyce, I'm going to have you start on this one.
Well, I think an effective co-op is where everyone gets together and then support and uplift one another, and there's transparency in the way we're working, and we know what we're doing. So it's like so I say, for example, like Snowing Wings Publishing has our own FB page where we do talk about things, we do voice out things. So there's some sort of transparency. So in a way, I think, and we also were aware that we are all working in a way working adults with our own lives. So we are aware of one another, what we're doing, what we're doing, and we know that the co-op is there, and then we are there that is there to help one another. And as I said, transparency. There's some sort of transparency. We will be aware of what's going on. And there's also a clear line of communications between the people you're working with. So I mean there will be a red flag if there's sudden silence and for a long time. But if the communication is always ongoing and is clear and you know what you're doing, this makes it effective. And yeah, I think Jamie will have more things to say.
Yeah, no,
Jamie, you can pick up.
yeah, I think I agree with all of that. And then I think also, especially if it's a large co-op, like it needs to be organized, because if there's just chaos and everybody's kind of doing what they want, things get out of control really well. So you need, at least one or a small group of people that are kind of, leading the charge, and it's not just, a free for all and that kind of thing. And, I appreciate co-ops that have, like a set of standards, or like hey, we expect that you do your editing, and that you have professional cover artists, and don't use AI and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think having some of those guidelines that align to your particular values and passions is helpful. So, if you're looking to get into a co-op, like ask to see those, what are the guidelines, what are the rules, look for any hidden fees, like what does it cost to join, am I required to pay additional things in addition to what I'm doing? And because if you're not going to publish for a while but you join and then you have to pay fees every month or every year, like that's going to hinder you from being able to afford your own publishing. So keep an eye out for those kinds of things, and make sure you're asking those questions of the folks that are running it before you join.
Kristin, you're like nodding your head. Yes. Do you agree? What are examples for you of an effective indie co-op?
Definitely organization, as they were saying, is key. Like, I'm very lucky that the co-op that I'm a part of, like, has some super ladies in charge. They run a newsletter to make sure everybody knows what releases are coming out. There's a Slack for all the authors to talk to each other. Like, just that helps foster community, that keeps everybody on the same page, everybody aware of what's going on and what's coming out. And like, I would say kind of a red flag, or at least I don't really know any co-ops that require fees up front to be a part of. That feels like a red flag for me. Just because, with most co-ops, you're already paying into the services that are there. So a fee on top of that feels a little sketch.
Yeah, that's like our last question, right? It's like, what are those red flags that you should watch for when considering joining a co-op? Definitely having to pay a fee feels like it would then be a vanity press or something where someone's asking for that upfront investment. Like how do those co-ops differ from those vanity presses if they do have it? So last question for the group here is just, what do you think are those red flags that people should look for if they're considering joining a co-op? If you're definitely ready to go and publish in, what are we looking for? How do we find that information? Jamie, you had kind of started mentioning that, so I'm gonna jump back to you on that.
Yeah. So I agree with the fees. Like if if there's just a constant, they're asking you to pay for stuff, and that you don't see the benefit of where it's going. Excuse me, sorry. And then sorry, come back.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to you. Joyce, let me know. What do you think are some of the red flags to consider when joining a co-op?
I think the definite red flag is the fee, permanent, like compulsory fee you have to pay. And it's like, why? Why do you have to need to pay uh the fee? And unless the fee is going into the fund that helps everyone, that's okay. But what if you're not publishing for that year? So are you just paying for the sake of paying? So another red flag is the lack of communications and organization. If there's no clear line of there's no organization as well, just back away as soon as possible. So fees and organization. These are the things we need to take note of.
Kristin?
Yeah, I think it's important to have that open communication and to know where funds are going and things like that. I would say that like maybe not necessarily a red flag, but like it's also good to keep in mind that people leave co-ops all the time. So it might not necessarily be a sign of the health of a co-op if you see authors leaving, because they might be going to start their own venture, or there might be, they no longer agree with the code of conduct that is in the co-op that they were in. So when you're choosing an indie co-op, you need to make sure that it aligns with your goals and ideals and not necessarily another author's.
That's yeah. Jamie?
Yeah, sorry about that. And then I'll also add, like, similar to traditional publishing, like the royalty should by and large be flowing to you. Like there should, there might be a share situation like with, editing, or depending, if they're paying for your editing or that kind of thing. But there should be some amount of money flowing towards you, and they should not be asking for your copyrights or your audio rights or those kinds of things. There should not be any rights grabs for any of your stuff. Like you should still retain the rights to your books and um, your audio rights and those kinds of things. So if you're seeing that, as an entry barrier to join a co-op, that's probably a red flag. That's probably not a good place to be. So
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like in terms of indie co-ops, you really seem to enjoy the collaboration between all of the authors. And I'm assuming when you go and you find these that there's some type of synergy between your works. So if you are a fantasy author, I imagine the full genre or like the library or catalog of those co-ops, do they try to kind of cater to specific genres, specific kind of groups of authors, or when they go through that submission process, is there a submission process the same way when you're querying to small presses? So I think that's one of the things that maybe we hadn't covered in this conversation. So I'm interested if people are interested in joining one, like how do I go and I find this? And then what's the process for me to touch base with co-ops, right? And go into that process. Kristin, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I know ours, my co-op does have a submissions process, especially to make sure that that your book kind of fits into the general like atmosphere jive of the group. We do tend to publish fantasy across the board, so we do new adult, and even YA titles. And we also have a branch that does more contemporary stories as well. But there is a submission process, one, to make sure that your story would kind of fit within the catalog, and two, to also make sure that there's space in the publishing schedule for people coming in. So
Jamie?
yeah, I believe Snowy Wings used to have a submission process that was more open, and we've got we've got quite a few authors now, so we've dropped to a referral only, but that's not to say it can't change. So in the future, I think it just depends on, where things are. But I think typically most co-ops either have like some sort of submission where, you'll submit a sample of your work or even your whole manuscript to make sure it kind of aligns with the philosophies and in the genres and everything that they're trying to publish. Or they'll have some kind of referral process. So, but yeah, if you see a co-op that you think would be interesting, like reach out to the authors that are involved and ask questions and say, hey, like, I saw you were in this co-op. I'd love to learn more about it. Most authors are willing to, kind of share and answer questions and those kinds of things. So just be curious if you see something of interest to you that you might want to join.
Joyce, do you agree, or like pieces of advice for that?
Mostly, I agree with Jamie, but yeah, this is where I mean, if you're interested in joining an indie co-op, first, most important thing is to reach out to the authors in the co-op and uh, ask them how was the experience like, etc., etc. And that's all. I mean, look, and also I've been thinking about like ethics and look for an indie co-op that in a way is in line with your own personal ethics and personal like beliefs. So it's the same thing as joining a publishing house. If the publishing house ethics will end up clashing with yours, then it's not a good fit. So look for any co-op that is a good fit for you.
Great. So last question, last, definitely now for for certain, it's the last question. What is your piece of advice for those authors who might be on the fence of either saying, I'm going to self-publish, I've done this for too long, and what's a piece of advice that you think would maybe push them in the right direction or the direction of joining an indie co-op? Someone who's really out there kind of struggling, what would you tell them, and what advice would you give as to whether this is how you can decide whether or not this is the right opportunity for you? Jamie, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I would first say I was that person. I was kind of on the fence of like I didn't know a whole lot about co-ops, and so I asked a lot of questions and what does this entail and what am I responsible for and those kinds of things. And what I found was a really amazing group of people that are super supportive, that showed me through walked me through the process and helped me come up with a product that it was the best that I could possibly make it with their help. And so I think I said earlier, like it's kind of the best of both worlds a little bit. Like if you're gonna indie publish and you don't want to do it alone, like co-op's probably the way to go, to have that support system. And and plus, writing's lonely. It gets you lots of writing friends. So
Kristen?
I 100% agree with that. Like one of the biggest selling points for me with the co-op was the community aspect. Like just having that support network, people to like do writing sprints with, people to bounce ideas off of, people who'd be willing to like read a section of your book in a pinch and tell you it's not total trash, having someone there to just kind of like throw you a lifeline when you're drowning. That is really the appeal to not going in alone versus joining that kind of like community situation.
Joyce?
I think again, I said community and support, and this is the most important. And that the fact that in the indie co-op you have control over your writing and your cover art as well. You get to work with amazing, talented illustrators and editors who are like the same in the same boat on the same boat as you. So it's like, yeah, community, and then you're in control of sorts in a
Awesome.
way.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys all so much for attending this indie co-op panel. Now, before we leave, I want to give our panelists a chance to kind of tell us where we can find them. How can we support their work? So, Kristin, why don't you start us off? Give me all your plugs.
There we go. You can find me on most selling sites, even on the Zon, they who must not be named. You can also find me on Instagram at Crazy Diamond Writes and on my website, KristinJacques.com.
Joyce?
You can find me on Snowy Wings Publishing, mostly most social media. I am Black Wolf Sing on Instagram, and I'm also found on mostly on Itch now, and also the Zoom. So I'm everywhere.
Awesome. Jamie?
Yeah, I think my author bio actually says spending a little too much time on social media. So yeah, you can find me on most of the social medias. I'm actually in the middle of a detox right now, trying to like call the chaos. But I'm on Instagram, Jamie Krakover on Instagram, and then everywhere else on X and Blue Sky. Though I'm trying to detox from X and get away from that as much as possible. Twitter, it's Twitter. It will always be Twitter. But I'm Rockets, the number 2, and then writing on both Blue Sky and there. So yeah, come out, say hi. I always say the rocket science jokes never get old. So if you want to tell me some rocket science jokes, that's totally cool too. But yeah, I talk a lot about space stuff and books and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thanks again for attending. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here. We will go ahead and closing this event out now, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat box, hit the question box. And again, don't forget to check out all of the events that are coming up next on the schedule. So full panels out there. Thanks again. This is Patrick signing off.